I call Poto Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can assure the House that there is no one more surprised than myself to be taking a call on a taxation bill, but I assure you I'll give it my best shot. Mr. Chairman, there's a very good reason I want to speak on this bill, and that is because the intent of this bill is to take the heat out of the speculation of the Auckland housing market, and there is nothing more difficult at this stage than people trying to buy their first homes in the Auckland housing market. And I want to acknowledge that the Select Committee obviously had quite a difficult time, Mr. Chairman, because the process was truncated. And I am sure that given the right opportunity to consult widely and the time to ensure that those people who wanted to submit on this bill could have, rather than being given 10 days with which to make their submissions, we may have come out with a bill that really did hit the mark in terms of taking the heat out of the speculation, particularly in the Auckland housing market. Mr. Chairman, the bill, right in its name, Taxation Bright Line Test for Residential Land Bill, the Bright Line rule applies. And I admit I had to go and look up what a Bright Line Test was. And as I understand it, Mr. Chairman, it's a judicial rule that will help restore ambiguous issues by setting a basic standard that clarifies the ambiguity and establishes a simple response. So right there, right up front, at the very beginning, in the title of the bill, is the intent of this, to clarify any ambiguity and to establish a simple response. So what I thought I would do, Mr. Chairman, is actually use this test in some of the provisions of the bill. So let's start off with the definition of the main home. And I admit I found it a little unusual to be looking at the definition of the main home when you're looking at the main home exemption, where the property owner may own more than one property, one home, that the main home would be the one which they have the greatest connection. And I guess if you're to use the test from that famous Australian film, The Castle, I guess you're thinking about the one that gives you, it's the vibe of it, the one that has the vibe. But when you're asking officials from Inland Revenue to make a determination about what the main home should be, should you not have a stronger test than that gives you the greatest connection? Then, Mr. Chairman, we look to the fact that this bill only covers residential land. It doesn't cover farms or commercial land. It just covers residential land. But under the definition of farms in this bill, it says farms, but not lifestyle blocks or hobby farms. So if we were to apply the test of establishing a simple response and clarifying ambiguity, what is the difference between a farm and a hobby farm? Is it how much income the farm takes? Is it the size? There's no clarity around that. And if the Minister is of a mind, it would be great if she could give us some clarity on that. Then, Mr. Chairman, I want to have a look at the date of disposal. The date of disposal, if we're going to apply the Bright Line test to that, is within the definitions, we recommend using the term Bright Line date instead of the date of disposal. I'm unsure what the difference between those two dates are, and again I seek clarification from the Minister. It would be very good to know what that is. My colleagues have already talked about the intent of this bill to curb speculation by requiring any properties that are held for 2 years or more to then, when they are sold, to then be subject, Mr Chairman, subject to tax on that in that period of time. But we've also heard that there are about 17 or 18% of properties that come up for resale within that 2-year period, within actually 17 or 18 months, is what has been told to the Select Committee, while the Treasury has actually recommended 5 years. Now, we know that, we can be fairly assured, Mr Chairman, that anyone who is interested in purchasing property for the sole purpose of making money from it will just hang on to that property for 2 years and 1 day before they sell it. But there is a real danger, Mr Chairman, that there will be some people caught unintentionally within that 2-year period, and they will be people, for example, those for whom there might be a matrimonial property issue, or people who may have had some financial concern that would require them to sell off the additional property. When we look at how much this tax, and it is a tax, let's be clear about that, is likely to achieve each year, we're looking at $5 million. And I would suggest, Mr Chairman, that the $5 million is actually going to come from this cohort of people who are not in a position of purchasing homes for speculative gain, but actually the people who will be those who are unintended to be caught by this, those who have matrimonial property disputes. I suggest that is where the bulk of this $5 million will come from. Because if we are actually looking to take the heat out of the market, we would be looking to the longer period that the Treasury have recommended, which is the 5-year period. As a previous speaker has already said, about 8% of homes are sold within the first year, 17–18% are sold within the 2 years, and then within 3 years we're looking at about 26% of homes that are resold. So if we are really looking at being intentional with regards to ensuring that we take the heat out of the Auckland housing market, this government should actually do the right thing, which is take Treasury's recommendation and move the period from the 2 years currently to 5 years. Mr Speaker, there are other issues I'm sure that will come up during the course of this debate, but at this point I thank you very much for the call.